quarter, they just happen to not win it. So it's possible that, they might be a 4-win team, but they're at least competitive to the point where they're at least going to try and, for at least some games, be competitive from the first to the fourth. Right.
And I got to say, man, I kind of feel for them because their quarterback tree, as we can call it, I guess, is very well documented. They make tree of the Cleveland Brown quarterbacks, man. It's like, that's where quarterbacks go to die, right?
Right.
But we've kind of been experiencing that the last 2 seasons with the Broncos. At the beginning of last year, if anyone remembers, nobody, absolutely nobody, not even Trevor Siemian thought he would be the starting quarterback. They draft Paxton Lynch in the first round. They trade up to get him. They bring in Mark Sanchez as a veteran guy. There was like a 0.01% chance that Siemian would start. And it was like that 0.01 was basically Sanchez and Paxton Lynch were incapacitated, and they literally had no other option.
Right.
And then several months later, the team finishes 9-7. They are basically a couple plays away from being 11-5 and winning the AFC West again and making another playoff run. And you come into this year, they bring in Mike McCoy. Everybody thinks that's going to be the big difference. Trevor Siemian's another year older. Plus, we got Paxton Lynch in your back pocket. He's another year older. Maybe he's developed a little bit. You've got that awesome defense intact. Plus, you bring in Domata Peko, and, we've seen how great he is. So, what happened, man? I'm going to ask you this, Cam. I'll pose you this question. Everybody was guaranteeing me that this team would be at least as good as they were last year. And then we were in the midst of an 8-game losing streak, which no one thought would be remotely possible. Where do you put the blame on this?
I don't see, and that's just it. And I've been trying to figure out as far as, who do you put the blame on? Because it's been so frustrating from the standpoint that you started this season 3-1. And also, for the record, Trevor Siemian probably played his best game ever as a Denver Bronco in the Dallas Cowboys game. And, you had people...
That game was better than any game he played in college, too. Let's be perfectly honest.
Right. Because, to be frank, he was competing against Kane Coulter, and people, while it may be, serves it right as far as the, as far as people that say that, him playing with Kane Coulter probably ruined his potential draft stock, that might be true. But the fact of the matter is...
Coulter and Siemian were like the poor man's Leak and Tebow.
Right.
People remember those Florida days?
Right.
The really, really welfare poor man's version. But it's interesting how that all works out where, Coulter is the more athletic guy and people don't give Trevor Siemian any credit. And, why would he even be drafted? He's a 7th-round guy. And I will say this, man. Everybody compares these late-round quarterback draft picks to Tom Brady. There's one Tom Brady. There's been one quarterback who, was taken in the 6th round and passed over time and time again that became the greatest of all time. And people just assume they're like, oh, well, Tom Brady was taken in the 6th round. That is a very isolated incident. And I heard people comparing Trevor Siemian at the beginning of the year, mind you, comparing him to Tom Brady because their rookie numbers were similar. And it's like, people, we gotta be realistic here.
Right.
They're just completely different people.
Well,
and you know what, man? I thought that Trevor would take that leap. And to be perfectly honest, being a healthcare practitioner and being in the field that I'm in, he hasn't looked healthy all year. He just looked he has that deer in the headlights look, like he's just shook. And he can't handle it.
And it's interesting because, I feel like there were some times where, last year there were times where he's, as far as, and I've said it before on Twitter, and you guys can follow both of us at Mile High Mario and at Cameron Parker PO. But I was mentioning it last year just that as far as a first season goes, he played better necessarily than probably anyone could have asked for. Doesn't mean necessarily that he, could have been better, because he could have. There's a lot of ways that he could have been better. Using his legs, being mobile, which is one of the reasons why the Broncos were 3-1 to begin the season, is because he was using his legs. And then you look at it, he started getting, it felt like he was getting injured a lot. And when he started getting injured a lot, he started pressing. And then when he started pressing, he started throwing interceptions. And when he started throwing interceptions, well, then you started getting into that Giants game to where players and defensive backs, I think Janoris Jenkins was one of them, was basically just saying that he was looking at wide receivers, basically single-handedly, looking at only one option.
They knew what was coming.
Right, they knew
exactly. They straight up said the pick six that Janoris Jenkins had right before the end of the first half, really that kind of sealed their fate. They had a chance to drive down, score some points before half, get a little bit of momentum, and it just, squashed any hope of that. And then he says, I knew what pass he was going to throw. And it doesn't help when you're trying to throw a 7-yard out and you throw it 2 yards behind the guy. And we saw the same thing in Miami. DT runs a 7-yard out. That's supposed to be an easy throw for a professional quarterback to make. Once again, he puts it 2 yards behind him, the absolute worst place that you can put it, and it's taken to the house for a pick six.
Well, and I was going to say,
with Trevor, he just didn't make those steps. It's so weird that he's the same guy that played in that Dallas Cowboys game.
Right.
If you remember, Cam, after that game, people were ready to give him a long-term extension.
I was one of them.
All over the airways, they beat the Chargers. He looked really good in Week 1 against the very solid San Diego team. And then, they dominated the Cowboys, I think a result that nobody expected. And people were ready to crown him as the future of Denver Broncos football. And now here we sit at the end of the season, and that could not be further from the truth.
Right. And not only that, but you go from, because I was somewhat in that crowd. Mark Schlereth was probably the more prominent of that crowd. He was the one that was saying that they need to lock up, Trevor Siemian to a contract extension then. And at that point, that's fine because, it was a cheap option. It's kind of like what they're potentially going to do with Cody Latimer, hopefully. And but it's a cheap alternative where you want to sign a guy now before he hits the open market. Well, hindsight's 20/20, and it looks horrible. And now you're looking at the side of the coin that Trevor Siemian is more than likely not going to be on the roster next year. And
yeah, you're right.
And so it's just a bad situation. And I feel bad for the guy. I feel bad for Trevor Siemian because I think he's an actual good dude. He's a goofy dude, and there is probably some comedic value to him as far as, as potentially being that teammate that is going to say that one thing that everybody's just going to laugh at. But I feel that, overall, and then this kind of even goes into the potential blame necessarily. And I hate throwing blame sometimes at a quarterback, but in essence, who are the two people necessarily that is going to receive the biggest blame on a football team? It's the head coach, and there's probably some blame to be thrown at Vance Joseph in his first year. Maybe even
the head coach is always going.
Right.
They're always going to get the most blame, Cam.
Right.
Even if it has nothing to do with them, and that's the most frustrating thing, man. Is the head coach is always a scapegoat. If a football team isn't winning, the fans immediately and the media immediately jump all over the head coach. And anybody who's been on Twitter for the last 4 months, on Broncos Twitter, I should say, they're well aware that people are not big fans of Vance Joseph. There have been some pretty heinous things said.
Wow.
And honestly, every player that I have talked to, and I talked to probably about half the guys on this roster, not one of them has one negative thing to say about Vance Joseph. Now, does that necessarily mean he's a good coach? Does that mean that he's doing the right thing? No. But at the same time, if one of these guys had a problem or they thought that he was the issue, maybe someone would have said something. So we as casual observers, we don't get a look at the day in and day out. What we see are these press conferences, and I think it's well documented. Vance is not great with press conferences. I think that's a learned skill. I still don't think Belichick has it, but he keeps it short and not so sweet, and people just don't ask him stuff anymore. And I think Vance Joseph, he tries to be politically correct, but he also tries to give sound bites. And here's the thing, man. If they're winning, it doesn't matter how bad Vance Joseph is with the media. But people think that because he can't talk to the media that he should be fired, and that's ridiculous.
Well, and, our biggest competitor, the predominantly orange, our biggest competitor, the Mile High Report, everything that I, found out is potentially about them wanting to create a Facebook page of Fire Vance Joseph, and that's just that. And while I think that Vance Joseph certainly could have been better at times during the season, going that route to create a Facebook page just solely for the sake of wanting to fire Vance Joseph, it's just incredibly asinine that people would actually go to that. I mean,
well, let's not put too much stake into Facebook groups because there's still a Facebook group that exists that is entitled Free Aaron Hernandez, and it was started by Patriot fans that thought he was innocent and wanted him to be released from prison. So, I get it, man. It's ridiculous, but you know what? Social media is toxic. I mean, it's kind of the downfall of sports. Like, there's no innocence left anymore.
Well, yeah, and I agree with that. It is a downside, and I love the platform necessarily of social media because everybody has a voice. But you put it perfectly. It's toxin.
It would be fantastic if people knew how to use it and they knew how to respect that right and that privilege.
Right.
These people, the worst kind of people on social media, man, are the ones that tweet at the players about fantasy football. And it's a freaking epidemic. And these people are so stupid. We've seen, man, like with Brandon Marshall, the Broncos linebacker. People will tweet at him thinking he's the other Brandon Marshall. That's how idiotic they are. That's how belligerent they are with what they're trying to do. It's like, and if you are listening, please, I implore you, do not be the person who tweets at a professional athlete. They are getting paid way more money than most of us can even fathom to do a job. They do not give two you-know-whats about your fantasy team.
No, they really don't. I mean, at the end of the day, they really don't. All they care about is getting wins. And in order for the Denver Broncos to get wins, well, let's just go into it because I think, and maybe this does in turn go to the blame, but when all is said and done and all the moves that need to be made, whether of what the Denver Broncos have to do to get better, it's clear the offense, is the biggest spot on the field that does need to get worked on. And as far as position, quarterback is the place that they go to. And I'm just torn on the idea of, always, it's always good to go with the cheapest alternative necessarily for the pros because it keeps the potential best part of the team intact, which is the defense. But there's also that place to where do we want to have a Peyton Manning situation where we want to spend ungodly amount of money to a quarterback, which it is a quarterback-driven league, or is it right to be wanting to throw all sorts of money at a guy like Kirk Cousins? I would love Kirk Cousins in Denver, but for the sake of wanting to potentially cut ties with a few key members of the defense, which was still really good this year. I mean, yes, the run defense and the big plays necessarily given up were unorthodox, and maybe not unorthodox, but just out of character for the Broncos defense. It left them. It could still potentially leave them with putting Vance Joseph in a awkward position of again controlling a locker room.
Well, man, as far as the defense is concerned, we heard a few years ago, kind of in the middle of the Peyton Manning era, we're only going to have this defense for a few years. We're only going to have this defense for a few years. And you heard it last year, and you hear it this year.
But really, that's not the case.
Feel bad, and I've said it before, I feel bad that we are wasting this defense. But here's the craziest thing, man. The last two games where the offense has actually stepped up, made plays, done their part. They got good quarterback play the last two games. And what happens? The defense pitches a shutout against the Jets, who, a week or two before put up 38 against the Kansas City Chiefs. And then you go into a team like, it's Indianapolis. They're not great this year, but they've got the big playmakers. And, they scored one touchdown off of a turnover. And then aside from that, they really couldn't get anything going offensively. And why is that? It's because they actually got good quarterback play. They were actually able to run the ball. It's fantastic what this defense is able to do when they are given a lead and they are given a cushion. And they're told, pin your ears back, make plays, and just fly around out there.
Well, absolutely.
Now, the crazy 29 years of life of watching this game, the defense is number 2 against the pass. They're like number 2 or 3 against the run. They're number 1 in total yards given up. So that means no other team in the entire NFL is giving up fewer yards than the Denver Broncos. But then they're ranked like in the 20s in points against. That makes absolutely no sense. And the reason for that, more than half of the points that the defense gives up are off of turnovers.
Yeah, exactly.
That is so unbelievably unexcusable. Because here's the thing, man. You don't even need that good of a quarterback. That's why people were ready to sign off on Trevor Siemian early on, because he wasn't turning the ball over, or at least not with the frequency that he is.
Right, not now.
The offense was doing what they needed to do to keep the defense in the game. And then when they went on that 8-game skid, all they did was turn the ball over. And not only did they turn the ball over, they were giving the opposing defense or the opposing offense the ball well inside inside the 50-yard line, well on their side of the field. Look at the Patriots game, Cam. They get a 3-and-out. Defense gets a 3-and-out. Huge emotional boost. I was at that game. The place was absolutely rocking. Then what happens? They fumble the ensuing punt. 2 plays later, Tom Brady throws a touchdown pass. And it takes all the air out of the stadium, and we know the rest of the events that transpired. The offense has done absolutely no favors for this defense. So when we start talking about quarterbacks, Kirk Cousins is going to cost a lot of money. But is there really that surefire quarterback? No one can seem to decide between Rosen, Darnold, Mayfield, Jackson, Allen. I mean, there are 5 names, and depending on who you ask, anybody, any expert can have a different guy as their number 1 quarterback. Mm-hmm. And you know what? When you have 5 top guys, you have 0 top guys. Mm-hmm. There's not a definitive number 1 overall pick. There's not a definitive best quarterback. So if you can get Kirk Cousins, and this is the thing, man, there are so many hypotheticals that it's almost unfair to even think about this at this point, because the Redskins could franchise tag him again and pay him a cool $34 million. He could go to a different team. Maybe he goes down to Jacksonville, a team that has the best defense arguably in the NFL, next to the Broncos, and have some nice young weapons and a good run game. Are we going to be able to restructure guys like an Aqib Talib or Demaryius Thomas, the guys, even make it up on Miller, the guys that are really demanding the majority of the salary? Aqib Talib told me something maybe a month and a half ago that has stuck with me. He said, if I've learned one thing in my 10 years of being in the league, it's this: you cannot be a serious contender and win without a quarterback. I mean, we've had 3 different starting quarterbacks this year, man. That is not, and it's not necessarily because of injury, because the guys haven't gotten the job done.
Yeah.
And when the best quarterback on our roster was a dude that was cut by the Cleveland Browns, you have a serious problem.
Right. And it's so funny. Maybe it's funny and maybe it's incredibly sad at the same time. But, we were talking about the Cleveland Browns earlier. What was the one area that was the best part of the Cleveland Browns for at least, let's just say 4 or 5 years? It was the defense, right? T.J. Ward, an ex-Cleveland Brown, was part of that team, to where the defense was really good. It was all about T.J. Ward, Joe Hayden, and a lot of. They
had a nice little deal, right? For sure.
They had a nice little defense on that Cleveland Brown. Obviously, not to the same level as the Broncos, but my point is that they played well enough on defense that they never could effectively get a stable quarterback. The difference between them and the Broncos is the ability to get a quarterback, and I think that, as often as we want to go after the quarterback, and it's interesting that, Aqib Talib actually said that, because Aqib Talib could potentially be a restructure. And if he feels that way, then I do believe that restructuring something with Aqib Talib could be plausible. Because everything that I've heard...
Here's the caveat to everything. When Peyton Manning was here, and, the team was one of, if not the best in the NFL, certainly a top team in the AFC, a couple number 1 seeds thrown in there. What has John Elway gotten credit for? He's gotten credit for being able to sign big-time free agents. Well, that's a lot easier to do when you got Peyton Manning running your team. You got Peyton Manning as your quarterback, everybody and their mother's going to want to come play for that team.
Right.
But then you look at it from the other aspect, and now where they're at, you don't have a quarterback. You have three different guys who have taken snaps from under center, and none of them have a winning record, and none of them have like a positive touchdown to interception ratio. Who's going to want to come? So I think this is going to be the biggest challenge that Elway will see.
I agree.
Because recruiting free agents, very easy when Peyton Manning is leading your team and is the quarterback. Very, very difficult to recruit free agents when you have no idea who your quarterback is going to be. And that, man, above anything else, is what convinces me that you need to do, or they need to do whatever they can to make sure Kirk Cousins is their quarterback, because a rookie is not guaranteed.
Yeah.
I don't want them to go out and get a Teddy Bridgewater or a Case Keenum, even though Keenum's playing great. I think it's an anomaly, and I think it's just the system that's suiting him. It's going to get him paid. And we'll see if that turns out to be a good decision or not. But if they don't do something immediately about this quarterback situation, they're not going to be able to get free agents to come here. And it's well documented as well that, maybe Elway's not the best drafter. I don't think he's as bad as people think. People want to just point blame wherever they can when the team is not winning. I mean, you do look at last year, two of our starting safeties who have had very good years this year, Justin Simmons and Will Parks, were both drafted last year. Adam Gotsis having a much better year. Devontae Booker, a lot of people consider to be, the future feature back. This year, obviously, Elway didn't do himself any favors with this draft class. But again, you got to give these kids a couple of years before you start throwing out that word, that B word, bust.
Right. And even and while it's been very, very bad for Paxton, is he on that certain line to be a bust? Absolutely. I mean, we have to put him there because it's been awful when he's been in. But again, and maybe this is kind of that underlying point as far as maybe the best case scenario. And the best case scenario is that Paxton Lynch does work out. Because if he...
absolutely.
Because if he
you
does...
To see that, that was the biggest thing, man. When you're going into this offseason, I don't think there were a lot of people that really thought Trevor Siemian would be the starting quarterback. People were kind of looking at it from an angle of, okay, Siemian was our quarterback. He went 8-6 because Paxton was 1-1 that year. Didn't make the playoffs. He was okay, wasn't good, wasn't great, wasn't terrible. Now we got to see what we have with Paxton because clearly Trevor's not the guy. And from what I had heard, in the preseason, like before everything started, man, was that it was Paxton's job to lose.
Yeah.
Because they have way too much invested in him, and don't get it twisted, like, Elway is an egotistical guy, and that's not a knock on him. You need to have a big ego to be in the position that he is in. All the other guys in the league who are in John Elway's spot, they are all egomaniacs. You have to be. In order to be successful, you got to have a short memory. But they had to try and prove that Paxton Lynch was a good pick because they drafted up for him. They picked him in front of the Cowboys, in front of the Chiefs, and now Chiefs fans, after that draft, they were pissed at their front office for not drafting Paxton Lynch. Now they seem to be okay with it.
Right. Yeah.
So the only two quarterbacks, and this might sound crazy, the only two quarterbacks that I would want to see under center realistically for the Broncos next year are Kirk Cousins and Alex Smith. Maybe you make a trade for Alex Smith if the Chiefs, aren't able to do anything in the playoffs, or even if they miss the playoffs. You got to feel like they're going to move on to Mahomes. I mean, they didn't broker their whole future to trade up to number 10 or whatever it was to go get Patrick Mahomes. And anybody that would tell you they don't want Alex Smith here, quite frankly, doesn't know a lot about football, man. And maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but geez, Alex Smith is such an underrated talent, and he's doing so much with that Chiefs team that has a terrible defense, that has some of the most idiotic, inconsistent play calling that I've ever seen. And midway through the season, we were talking about him as an MVP candidate.
Yeah.
How would you not want that guy in your team compared to what we got now?
And it is crazy because, I mean, even even people are throwing out the idea of Phillip Rivers being here as the Denver Bronco quarterback. And
let me ask you something, man. He's been with the Chargers his entire career, right? What, 14, 15 years? It
right.
feels like 30. It feels like the dude's been playing since the 70s. You've been playing your whole career with a team. Are you really going to want to go to that rival when the position that your team is currently in is better than your rival?
But I mean,
people want to give, and I know people are going to refer to Brett Favre. Well, Brett Favre went to the Vikings. At that point in time, the Vikings were a much better team than the Packers.
Well,
right now, the Broncos are not a much better team than the Chargers.
Right, but I
just don't see it. I would think it's a pipe dream, but I think it's impossible.
Well, but my point though is just as far as like comparing the situation as far as Alex Smith and Phillip Rivers as far as wanting those quarterbacks on your roster, because who wouldn't? And for people that think that I wouldn't want a Phillip Rivers here because he throws a ton of interceptions. Well, I'm here to tell you that look at where the Chargers are right now. They are at the point.
I agree 100% with you, man.
Because you look at where the Chargers are right now. They are a winning football team, and look, were they going into the season on paper? Were they one of the worst teams in the AFC West, and maybe the worst team in the AFC West? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that they are one of the talented teams as far as a potential crew around them with talent. Because that's one of the best things about Phillip Rivers is he's made the people around him better. I mean, Keenan Allen, he's finally healthy, and he's a legitimate weapon for Phillip Rivers. And then now you get the case with Alex Smith that he has a lot of talent around him, and he's able to work with it. But also Alex Smith is talented himself because people really do underrate his mobility, being as old as he is. So the options are I think the options have to be there, and I think that's why guys like Tyrod Taylor certainly don't get enough credit, maybe as far as being an option for the Broncos, because people forget that when Peyton Manning was here in 2015 and when Brock Osweiler was here in 2015, there was that option, and maybe that bridge is burned. Obviously, maybe that bridge is burned, but there was that option that Tyrod Taylor was going to be signed at least to compete for a starting job with the Broncos. So
you know what the proposed deal was, right? From the Buffalo Bills, they wanted Trevor Siemian and Shaq Barrett for Tyrod Taylor. Maybe a couple draft picks thrown in there. And I'm thinking to myself, when the Broncos, early in the second round, take DeMarcus Walker, I'm thinking, bye-bye Shaq Barrett, and here comes Tyrod Taylor. But the Broncos weren't willing to give up Shaq Barrett. You know what? I don't blame them, man. Shaq Barrett is fantastic, and he would get a ton more attention if it wasn't for that dude named Von Miller on the other side of him. Mm-hmm. But let me ask you this, Cam. If that was the proposed deal, straight up Trevor Siemian and Shaq Barrett for Tyrod Taylor, before the season, before you knew all the events that have transpired, are you taking that deal?
Still probably not.
Tell me why.
Just for the simple fact about Shaq Barrett. And
so you see Shaq Barrett, like you hold him in that high regard.
Yes.
Because here's the thing with him now, man. He's going to demand a lot of money. He's going to be like almost a Malik Jackson type, where not a lot of people, he's not a household name, but the guys around the league realize what a phenomenal talent he is. And he's going to get some flack for, from people saying, oh, well, he's a good pass rusher because everybody game plans for Von Miller and everybody tries to stop Von Miller. Malik Jackson got the same flack. They're like, oh, well, the only reason Malik Jackson was good was because of the no-fly zone and Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware were rushing the passer.
Look what he's doing in Jacksonville.
But Malik had a Pro Bowl year this year. He made the Pro Bowl. So obviously he's worth the money. So now when I ask you, what happens when the Broncos aren't able to re-sign Shaq Barrett? Then we look really foolish for not making that deal.
Yeah, and I mean, we have Shane Ray certainly, and the potential is there, but we just haven't seen it. But, people have been arguing as far as the potential of Shane Ray and Shaq Barrett for years to come, and they will, no matter what. But the thing is that, I mean, maybe it goes back to next year's draft because of how deep the defensive ends are. As great as it is for a Shaq Barrett to play in his hometown, quote unquote, or for the play for the Colorado State
I get what you're
Rams.
saying.
Right, and play for the Colorado State Rams and then play for the Denver Broncos. As great as it is, and I fall in that trap too. As far as being too sentimental sometimes, but people also have to understand that.
Well, if we're talking about that, man, you remember Eddie Yarbrough? I mean, he went to high school in Colorado, went to Wyoming. He was a dude on the Broncos practice squad. Everybody was really pulling for him. Didn't make the team, and he's been balling out there in Buffalo.
Yeah.
But while I definitely understand the sentiment, like you love local kids, it's awesome to have local products on your team, whether, from high school, like when Tyler Columbus was here, a kid that went to Cherry Creek High School and CU. It's a nice story.
Yeah.
But you can't, let that affect whether or not you want to sign him.
Right. Unless it's Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah. Oh, well, of course. But it's not because of Christian McCaffrey. Right. Christian McCaffrey has done something that no other rookie running back has done, Cam. He has 70 receptions and 5 receiving touchdowns. No rookie running back has ever done that.
Yeah.
So that's not even like a local thing, like it's cool because everyone knows McCaffrey. It's a household name in Denver. We would want him because he's really, really damn good.
Right, and especially now, I mean, obviously people want to coin the term as, Devontae Booker being the future, and he might very well be. Because everything that I've heard, is that Devontae Booker is the future, as far as the running back is concerned. And they really do like D'Angelo Henderson. Although,
I really want to know why he's not getting any playing time.
Yeah, me too.
Let me ask this question first, and then follow it with that question. Why do we have Jamal Charles, Cameron? Remember how excited people were? They're like, man, if he could put up like 1,000 total scrimmage yards, like 500 receiving, 500 rushing, that would be perfect. Score a couple touchdowns. He's the big play guy.
I was coining him as a comeback player of the year.
He's done, one touch in the last 2 games against not good teams?
Yeah.
That's crazy to me, man. Like, why are you playing him? Are they saving him for next year? They signed him to a 1-year deal. So if you're not even going to play Jamal Charles and, put him on the field and put the ball in his hands, why in the world isn't D'Angelo Henderson playing?
Well,
that's what I don't understand. If they're using all 3 of their backs, okay, then Henderson can wait it out and then get his turn next year.
Yeah.
But they're starting him and he's not playing.
Well, and that's the thing is, well, and see, and that's the deal is, and I'm with you 100%, because if we were going to treat it necessarily like to maybe do a service to Jamal Charles and cut him, midway through the season so that he can jump onto a playoff team,
they should have done that.
They should have done that. And I think that and obviously we love exactly what the Atlanta Falcons did last year, because they basically proven that you can win a lot of games with a lot of really good running backs. Are we using them? No. I mean...
And then you also see over there, if we're going to talk about the Falcons, you see how important the offensive coordinator is.
Right.
I didn't really understand the firing of Mike McCoy. I mean, you don't have a quarterback to throw the ball, and the offensive line isn't doing a lot of favors, and we can get into that later. I still think it's because our quarterbacks have no idea how to step up into the pocket, and that's why the line was giving up so much sacks. But that's a different discussion for either later or for a different day.
Right.
When you look at the offense that Atlanta had last year, that's why they made it to the Super Bowl. Julio Jones was absolutely unstoppable. Matt Ryan was the MVP. They had 2 excellent running backs. And they're starting to figure it out a little bit. And, Julio has had a good, not great year by his standards. I mean, really, it was the one game that he had against Tampa Bay where he had, 2 touchdowns and 250 receiving yards or something that have kind of skewed his numbers. But they are really missing Kyle Shanahan, and I think it was very hasty of the team to fire Mike McCoy. What's he supposed to do when he doesn't have a quarterback?
Right. I mean, the only thing I could think of is, well, and I think that maybe even going back to the Jamal Charles thing, I think that's probably, of all the significant things, that Vance Joseph could potentially have done in the season, that is probably the biggest thing. The whole Jamal Charles, D'Angelo Henderson thing, that's probably the biggest thing that I could see falling on his shoulders. Obviously, people are going to coin, that he maybe could have handled the quarterbacks a little bit better, and maybe there's a little bit of a point there. But
okay, well, let me ask you this, man. With hindsight being 2020, and you're saying he should have handled the quarterbacks better. If you're in Vance Joseph's position, what do you do? Because let's just be frank here. The reason that Elway wanted Vance Joseph and not Kyle Shanahan or anybody else is because Vance Joseph would be the guy that Elway could impose his will on and get what he wants from him. Kyle Shanahan wouldn't relinquish that kind of power, not knowing who his dad is. Kyle Shanahan wanted to come to Denver. And now you see, I mean, I used this as an example the other day. Jimmy Garoppolo has proved, like, quintessentially how important the quarterback position is. Because you're looking at a San Francisco 49ers team that was, considered one of, if not the worst teams in the NFL. They start playing Jimmy Garoppolo, they have not lost. And they beat a playoff team in the Tennessee Titans. That is exactly how important a quarterback is. It can turn around your entire season.
Well, and
that all harkens back to what we're talking about. That's why I think you go out and you do what you can to get a Kirk Cousins.
Right. And I think just to me, and as far as the offensive coordinator and maybe the quarterback coach in essence, maybe it's one of the reasons why I've been so frustrated in the use of Paxton Lynch. While he's been horrible in games, don't get me wrong, he's been horrible in games, but as far as the offense that he's potentially been running, obviously we want it to be so that he's comfortable. We want to do it so that it's the run-pass option. Have you seen the amount of times that he's been under center, and in the times that he's been quarterback in the short stint that he's been a starting quarterback? He's been under center. I don't exactly have a stat with me, but I would imagine that he's been under center at least 60 to 70% of the time.
That's a guy that shouldn't be under center at all.
Right, and as far as wanting to make an offense for him and making it, let's just say, a college-style offense, which is working with Carson Wentz. The important thing is that maybe this goes back to the Paxton Lynch could be a starter in 2018. I think that maybe it's the case that they are making it so vanilla with Paxton Lynch that they don't want to expose anything with the guy.
Well, you're right, man. And think about it this way. The reason people were so excited that Mike McCoy came back, including guys like Demaryius Thomas, man, he had his old offensive coordinator back when he was putting up huge, like, Star Wars numbers when he was there last time. Granted, Peyton Manning was the quarterback, but look at what Mike McCoy did with Tim Tebow. And that is always the example. Like, that was really the thing that got me, really amped about Mike McCoy coming back, is that he won games with Tim Tebow. And like we know, watching Tim Tebow for 3.5 quarters was the most frustrating thing.
But then a light turned on.
Ever watched. But he won games and he did what he needed to do. Shoot, he won a playoff game against a team that probably could have, challenged for a Super Bowl that year.
And by the way, jump started Demaryius Thomas's career.
Exactly. So why, when you bring back a guy who had so much success, who got so much out of the guy in Tim Tebow, like, why do you not translate that to Paxton Lynch? Because Paxton Lynch is a much better quarterback than Tim Tebow. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think anybody will disagree. Maybe there are people whose views are a little bit misguided. I would take Paxton Lynch over Tim Tebow 7 days a week, 365 days a year. But they didn't use him right. And let me ask you this, man. You saw what happened when Brett Hundley took over the Packers. He could not hit water if he fell out of a boat the first 3 games. And then he goes into Pittsburgh. They play the Steelers, and they, are a defensive stop away from getting that huge win and really kind of keeping the Packers in that playoff race. All you need is for the guy to actually get playing time. From everyone that I've talked to, Paxton Lynch is a gamer. I mean, he's a peacock, Cap. You gotta let him fly. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And they didn't do that. They put the reins on him. They clipped his wings, and he was not able to grow as a quarterback. And I know this is kind of a farce, and maybe this is a bit of an anomaly, but you look at the other 2 quarterbacks that were taken in his draft, Goff and Wentz. Goff was being written off as a bust last year because he was terrible with the Rams. Now he's part of one of the best offenses in the NFL.
Yeah.
Wentz won, 5 or 6 games with the Eagles. He didn't have a great rookie year. And then before he got hurt, I mean, he probably would have been the MVP if he doesn't get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Because those guys had an entire year and an entire offseason to acclimate themselves with the offense and got used to being starting quarterbacks. It is so hard to be a quarterback in this league when you're not actually able to play quarterback.
Right, and I
don't know if we'll ever get an actual reading on whether or not Paxton Lynch can play.
Right, and so I think that you were throwing out your options as far as potentially being a quarterback, and the quarterback you're throwing out Kirk Cousins and Alex Smith. I would actually say that it's 3 options if you want to throw the Alex Smith option in there. I would actually say that the potential starters, and people are going to hate me for it, because of the potential gold star comparison that will live in infamy, tweet that will last a decade, which is me saying that Paxton Lynch is going to be greater than Carson Wentz and Jared Goff, which looks beautiful right now. But I think that when you look at it, Paxton Lynch, I think of the 3 guys that could potentially be starter if we're going to go by the Alex Smith, I think is Kirk Cousins. And so Alex Smith, and then I think Paxton Lynch. Although there is a thought necessarily that, and based on everything you've heard, you can fill me in on this. But what if, and everything that I've heard, you can back me up on this if you want. Everything that I've heard is that the Denver Broncos have done a lot of homework on the NFL draft, and as far as the quarterback situation, and they don't like it. However, there's a thought that is kind of creeping into my mind, and I put it on Twitter. I don't know if you saw it. But it's this idea that, well, we also know that the NFL is like the Kremlin. It's the best advice I ever got from Troy Rank, is that the NFL is like a Kremlin. We don't know exactly what goes behind closed doors. So, I mean, it's possible that, and it might be true that the Denver Broncos do not like this quarterback class. But what if it's a smokescreen? Just to say that it might be the greatest smokescreen known to man. That they've done so much homework on all the draft quarterbacks that they don't like any of them. They would have to at least like maybe one of them.
I mean, it's hard to say, man. I haven't heard that, but one of the most unpredictable things, like, you never know what you're going to get. There are some guys who are touted. I mean, think back to Jamarcus Russell. I mean, Skip Bayless, and yes, I realize who I'm quoting here. Skip Bayless said that Jamarcus Russell was going to be the next John Elway. And here's the thing. Physically, he very well could have been.
Yeah.
Mentally, not even close. There's no fathomable way to predict how a quarterback is going to turn out. Look at the Washington Redskins. I mean, speaking of Kirk Cousins, they traded up. They brokered their whole future to go get RG3.
Oh, but
that was a management thing.
But by the way,
Shanahan's guy. That's why Shanahan drafted Cousins in the 5th round.
Exactly.
And if you remember, people were shocked by that. They're like, why would they get Kirk Cousins if they got RG3?
Because they covered their butts.
4 or 5 years, and you see exactly why that happened.
Yeah, they covered their butts.
Exactly.
Because they knew, and and not only that, people were shocked and appalled by it. But by the way, if you remember, I think it was the tweet about 2 years ago or a year ago, Ian Rappaport was saying that, I don't know if it was Denver or whatever, but it was basically just saying that teams were lining up to draft Kirk Cousins if he was available. If Washington had not drafted him. So Kirk Cousins was clearly on the radar. Of other teams. Now, I don't necessarily think that could he have been in the best situation possible, and could he have been pushed into potentially being a top 10 quarterback in the National Football League? I don't know, because that's hindsight 2020. But the fact of the matter is that Kirk Cousins was on a lot of teams' radar, and we'll see potentially who he ends up going to. I still believe, in everything that I've heard, is that Kirk Cousins is the number one priority for the Broncos. And
he has to be, man. Here's the thing: if you put a quarterback on this team, a guy that actually knows how to play the quarterback position in the NFL, like a Kirk Cousins knows how to do, the Broncos are a playoff team this year, and I know it sounds like hyperbole, and I know it sounds crazy that one upgraded position could mean that much, but you get a guy like Kirk Cousins in here, or let's just say a guy that understands the quarterback position, a guy that understands that he needs to step up into the pocket to make throws, a guy that understands that he needs to go through his progressions, go through his reads. Look at the play that Trevor Siemian got hurt on in Indianapolis. He took a 5-step drop, turned it into a 7-step drop, and then rolled out to his right. And Trevor is not a fast guy by any means. So what happens is he gets chased down from behind by a bigger, stronger, faster, athletic defensive end. I think it was Barkevius Mingo. It makes Garrett Bowles look bad because Garrett doesn't have eyes in the back of his head. He can't see what Trevor's doing. I mean, all Barkevius had to do was just go around him. And that was what led to him getting hurt. Now, if he had stepped up into the pocket like he was supposed to do as a quarterback and make a throw, Trevor doesn't get hurt. Bowles doesn't get blamed for him getting hurt and for giving up the sack. And that has been an epidemic. Trevor and really anyone who's been under center, mostly Trevor, they've made the offensive line look so much worse than it is because they don't understand how to play the quarterback position. They're deer in the headlights. They're shaken up.
Well,
that happened if Brock had more. If Brock had started the year and as the quarterback, maybe not. Would it have happened if Paxton Lynch was able to get his feet under him last year and this year? Maybe not. There's no way to tell. But we can tell for sure that Trevor just does not have that instinct.
Right, and I think that, you know what, and here's a point that I wanted to make to you, and I wanted to make and maybe I haven't actually put it on Twitter yet, and who knows, it might catch like wildfire because it's social media. But I think it's a point that's incredibly underrated about Kirk Cousins. Do people not forget, well, for one, that he had Le'Veon Bell, but that's beside the point at Michigan State. The point is, he played for Michigan State. And if we remember, Michigan State had one of the best, if not the best, defenses in the country with Kirk Cousins. So not only does Kirk Cousins understand now how to play the quarterback position for, maybe 5 years now? But it's also to the point that Kirk Cousins understands how to play with a great defense. And I think that point doesn't even come across anymore. It's like people forget that he played with Michigan State because it's in college. People forget that he played with a great defense, like a Shalik Calhoun when he was coming in, and all those guys that were great defensive players, on that defense for Michigan State. People forget that. I think that for that, the transition is like coming home necessarily for Kirk Cousins, and it's probably one of the reasons why I would imagine that the Broncos could be high on Kirk Cousins' list. John Elway being one of the reasons.
Well, I think there's a lot. I think you're definitely onto something there because if we think back to the 2015 Super Bowl season, that offense was not great. That defense won them probably 4 or 5 games just based on, interceptions returned for touchdowns, big defensive stops. And a guy like Peyton Manning, who had been the focal point of every single team he had ever been on for every year of his career, for once in his career realized that he needed to let the defense make plays. So if you go back and watch the film from Super Bowl 50, Peyton Manning did not try and make any plays. He did not try and push the ball at all. And you could hear him on the sideline saying, just run the ball, let the defense take care of it. He understood that all he had to do was not make a mistake, not put the defense in a precarious position, and they were going to win that game the way that they had won so many games that
year. And again, it's just, and aside from that Super Bowl, the only biggest play that Peyton Manning had, and we're about 4 minutes away till the end of the show, but really the only big play for Peyton Manning in that Super Bowl 50 was the first play. And that first play ended up being a pass to Owen Daniels, just to at least get comfortability to Peyton Manning. That's pretty much it. I mean, aside from third down conversions to Emmanuel Sanders, but still, I think it's a coming home point for, and it's probably one of the reasons why Jacksonville is appealing, maybe for Kirk Cousins, although I could see Eli Manning being the potential target there. Although they did pick up the option for Blake Bortles, and who knows there. And Blake Bortles is playing well.
I would take Blake Bortles right now. Look what he's doing with a bunch of receivers no one's ever heard of.
Well, aside from Allen Robinson, and I do believe that
Robinson's been out all year.
Well, sorry, my bad, yeah.
Last week was Keenan Cole. You think anybody knows who Keenan Cole was? Do you think Keenan Cole's friends and family started him in fantasy football? Absolutely not. And
right.
He was the highest scoring wide receiver in fantasy last week. Nobody knew who he was.
Right, I guess I forgot about Allen Robinson. I forgot about Allen Robinson being out, but wouldn't it be kind of funny? Your buddy Benjamin Albright, who you know so well, put a tweet out about Nick Foles potentially being a backup option, and it's so funny. Can you imagine a Blake Bortles versus Nick Foles Super Bowl, and the winner goes to be the starter of the Denver Broncos?
That is some sort of alternate universe. I would pay to see that. I would definitely pay to see a Nick Foles, Blake Bortles Super Bowl, although I'm sure the NFL would crap its pants if something like that happened, because I don't think the ratings would be quite what they have been in the last few years. They don't have the star power that the league would want at the quarterback position. I, for one, would love to see that. But as far as thinking about those guys as like the quarterback of the Broncos at any point, I'll pass on that. I don't think there's any sort of remote possibility on that one.
Right, I mean,
how important it is to have a backup quarterback, man. And Case Keenum shows you how important it is to have a third-string quarterback. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's crazy to see, like, you see these guys stepping in, and they're all better quarterbacks than what the Broncos are doing, whether it be from the play call or just the fact that they do not have good talent evaluators at the quarterback position.
Well, and again, and it's definitely a whirlwind. It's been a whirlwind season. It's been one of the craziest seasons, and I think back to how ecstatic and excited we were for the 2014 free agency. After they got walloped by Seattle. I would actually put this free agency upcoming as the free agency that could parallel 2014. And
this is going to be the most pivotal offseason maybe in Broncos history, because the actions of the front office and of John Elway and the powers that be in this offseason will dictate, maybe the next 5, maybe the next 10 years. If they get some good free agents and they hit on a couple draft picks, look at the New Orleans Saints, man. I mean, going into the season, everybody had them as basement dwellers in that division. Now, they're probably going to win that division. They might have the offensive rookie of the year. They might have the defensive rookie of the year. They got a great tackle in Ryan Ramczyk. That shows you just what an excellent draft can do. But what's the caveat? You got to have a quarterback.
Right, exactly. Well, Mario, thank you very much, man, for coming on, and we will make sure that we can have you on again, because let's face it, we love talking Broncos, and there's also no commercials, as we found out listening to this hour-long podcast, which is also fun.
That's the best way to do it, baby.
It is the best way to do it. And Mario, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Cannon Progress Show podcast on iTunes.
You know I will.
Well, hey, man, thanks again, man, for being a part of it, and we will definitely have you on. Yeah, absolutely. We will definitely have you on and talk some Colorado Rapids soccer. I'm kidding.
Yeah, you're going to have to find someone else on that. I cannot name one player on that team, but yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we'll definitely have to have you on here, obviously in the off season, get your thoughts on potentially truly where do they go. And kind of the identity of the team, and what is the true identity of the team now that it is the off season. So we'll have you on here as the season is winding down, or is winded down, I should say, because it is already winding down.
I'm down like 4 flat tires on the dump truck, man. Anytime.
All right, man. Well, hey, thank you very much, man, and we'll definitely be keeping in touch.
All right, brother. Take care, man.
Take care.
Keep up the good work.
You too. That was Mario Vetanze, and we as always are grateful to have a lot of people on the Cameron Parker Show. CJ couldn't be a part of it Tuesday, but he is our fantasy gurus insider, and so we are thankful for his for his input. We are thankful for Mario's input. We're thankful for guys like Brooks and a bunch of others. Certainly, Sayer Bettinger, one of them, and Nick Kendall, as well as another. And oh, by the way, I want to mention that upcoming on Saturday, I will be hopping on the Mile High Huddle podcast with Nick Kendall and Carl Dumler for their Scout's Eye preview of kind of delving into a lot of different of the draft prospects. So get a chance to do some of the draft homework and do a lot of the homework for prospects. And the show will be we'll be recording a show obviously for Saturday morning, and then it's going to be hitting the airways. So thank you guys very much again for making the Cameron Parker Show a part of your guys' evening. It is 7 o'clock in Denver and in the Mile High City, and if you guys are listening everywhere, thanks again for making the Cameron Parker Show part of your for your guys' night. Follow the show handle at CP_show. Follow Mario Vetanze at Mile High Mario, and follow me as well as at Cameron Parker PO. Follow the show handle at CP_show. Thank you guys very much for all the continued support that you guys continue to give the show. Text in. Last time we had a fun little show of the Periscope broadcast, so you guys get a chance to see behind the scenes. Me wearing the Suns Out, Guns Out muscle shirt. Thank you guys for tuning in. And as always, we will be back on Tuesdays. Obviously, the dates have been fluctuating every now and then, but the Cam Parker Show will do its best to advertise and promote and promote the show, and we will try our best to be on for 2 days a week. Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 o'clock. But as always, we will put forth 2 shows a week if we can. This has been the Cam Parker Show, and I hope you guys have a great weekend, a blessed Christmas, a Merry Christmas, and a happy holidays, and we will be back on Tuesday right after Christmas on the 26th. You guys have a blessed night.